Well, it's the Halloween season. And that means I'm obligated to play horror-themed crap, right? I guess so, because I played 6 ROMHacks over the last week or so, several of which I'd never played before now, and all of which were at least vaguely spooky. I already did the legwork, so you guys can just sit back and reap the old grocery bags full of overpriced benefits. Time to see if these Halloween goodies are treats, or if it's all just razor blades and hard drugs, which is apparently what passes for a trick these days. First up on our list is a lovely little taste of Halloween magic, a ROMHack for Metroid Zero Mission on the GBA. Metroid Spooky Mission is a hack by Biospark, 1 of 99, Captain Glitch, Ing, Cosmic, and Nathan Tech, with contributions by Shrug. Spooky Mission was a massively influential hack back when it was released in 2018, since it was easily one of the most ambitious Zero Mission hacks up until that point. It features a loving coat of Halloween paint over the standard ZM fare, including enemies, as well as tile sets from other games like Castlevania and Wario Land. You take control of Samus as she tries to save the Space Pumpkin from the evil Imago, the Hornet boss, lest the world be subjected to eternal Christmas. Spooky Mission is quite expansive, with 3 decently sized areas to explore, as well as a few small ones. There aren't any new power-ups here, as you'd probably guess, but some of them are renamed something cheeky that never failed to give me a laugh. You can also save your game by selling your soul to the devil, but as far as I can tell, Samus has a ton of souls, and she doesn't really suffer any ill effects, though that might just be because she's a woman. Am I right, fellas? In the difficulty department, Spooky Mission is a bit hard to pin down. I would say that the way you're led into levels isn't exactly intuitive, but the better you are at the game, the less this will actually matter. You can tackle 2 of the 3 main areas initially, with the third being mostly locked behind super missiles, but you'll probably bounce off of the difficult bosses first. My suggestion is to not face any main bosses to begin with, and just run around collecting what power-ups you can. Once you feel confident enough, then you can start taking down bosses and collecting the spooks you need to get into the final area and kill the buzzing bastard humming around in the Space Pumpkin's guts. Spooky Mission gets a big recommend from me. Not just because of how funny it is, but because you get a real sense of accomplishment from figuring it out. It's cool playing a big piece of ROMHack history like Spooky, and it's even cooler seeing how well it holds up. The next game I played is a few years old, hack by the name of Grunty's Mansion. Banjo-Kazooie has always been a favorite of mine, and there are a surprising number of hacks for it, and an even more surprising number of hacks that transpose some other video game onto the Bear and Bird's first adventure. I have no idea why this specifically is the case, but golly, there are a lot of them. And although it's become something of a signature style for premier Banjo-Kazooie hacker Mark Kirko, this hack isn't actually one of his. This is a piece by Jackson Game Studios, who seems to have tried his hand at aping the Kirko style to varying degrees of success. Please note that my footage has a lot of graphical errors because I'm fairly certain my settings weren't quite right. Don't worry, you aren't having some kind of diabetic hallucination. My N64 is just real persnickety. Grunty's Mansion, as you've probably figured out by the footage and the name, drops the daring duo into Luigi's Mansion, specifically the first one. I think the original Luigi's Mansion has one of the most finely crafted worlds out there, but it doesn't exactly translate super well here. Even in the original game, backtracking becomes a bit of a chore, but here, the amount of just walking around you have to do really had an impact on my enjoyment of the game. Bafflingly, there's a couple of challenges that take place over bottomless pits that take you back to the very beginning of the hack if you fall in, which means even more walking. One of these challenges is particularly hard because, in my opinion, super precision platforming isn't really Banjo's bag, and the camera doesn't help at all. So imagine the amount of fun I was having falling off of these tiny platforms, then walking slowly back up to the astrology room, which is on the second floor, then falling off again, then walking back up. It's less almond joy and more mounds. Mounds of shit. Thankfully, the other challenge like this is extremely easy and you really shouldn't have to do it more than once. I suppose that brings me to the level design, which serves its purpose well enough in all but a few spots. There are some locations in the basement that were so dimly lit that I didn't even realize there were entrances down there. And I feel like some lanterns on the wall or something really easily could have remedied this. Especially since the basement in Luigi's mansion isn't even that dark to begin with. There are also a few areas that are just ripped directly from Mad Monster Mansion, although I can't really judge them too harshly, considering how insignificant they are to the overall experience. Plus, one of them has a fun Easter egg that drove me completely insane for about an hour just trying to figure out exactly what I was looking at. Go check out the stop and swap egg in the cellar. That's the only hint I'm gonna give you. Overall, Grunty's Mansion is a fine experience, if not a little bland. It's exactly what it says on the tin, with absolutely no frills and very little of interest outside of the novelty of the concept. Even the characters themselves seem bored with the whole thing, not helped that there's very little original dialogue, which was of course one of the strongest points of the original game. While there were definitely a few moments that were treats, the tricks stood out enough that I don't think I'd ever revisit Grunty's Mansion, even if they did stop handing out those awful chocolate coins. But I'd recommend it if you're a big fan of Luigi's Mansion, since you'll probably get a kick at how some of the ideas were executed. Alright, let's see, what else have I got in my bag? Oh, this one. I can't believe how disappointed I was in this thing. It's like the Council, made up of Letterbomb, Jared Bryan, Zarby89, Scoffle, and Jay Mizu, all dressed up a bit of black licorice like my favorite candy bar. Then, also, while I was eating it, they were kicking me in the nuts. All Hallows Eve is a ROM hack of Link to the Past that reflavors the game with Halloween decorations and a new story. Aesthetically, the game nails it, seriously. This game has so much Halloween in it, I think you could condense it into a toxic gas to instantly kill those girls who pretend to be witches on social media. Unfortunately, the level design really doesn't follow through, and I ended up dropping the game just before the first boss. I really appreciated how early on Zelda gives you a hint on where to go first, so the familiar yet redesigned world map didn't throw me for a loop immediately. But once I actually got where I was going, it was misery. Not like Misery Mire, I mean I just hated it. The Council loves their enemies, I tell you, and they put them everywhere. Everywhere. It's certainly possible that I could have gone out of my way to find more hearts before going to my first destination, but I feel like when my only hint is go to the pumpkin patch, I'm supposed to go to the pumpkin patch. It's a shame, because there are clearly a lot of interesting ideas here. For one, there's a mostly unique story, and even some cutscenes, kind of. Zelda is kidnapped by some evil fellow while you pray to a chicken. There's setup, and I bet there's even a payoff. The dungeon has tons of secret rooms, and I found several heart pieces just finding my way around. What isn't interesting is that those secret rooms are dark mazes, full of fake treasure chests and enemies that whittle away your health little by little. The amount of just walking around I had to do in the first dungeon was egregious, especially considering there's a shortcut you unlock after finding the second treasure that would have made the whole thing infinitely less frustrating and tedious. By the time I had died for the third time against those little turtle guys you gotta flip over with the hammer, I was done. You drop me into enough rooms with scores of those little turtle guys, I'm good. Better luck next time. I'm sure there's a lot of fun to be had here, really. If you're the kind of guy who really likes Link to the Past and doesn't mind frustrating combat and some annoying dungeon layouts, this game is probably going to give you a lot more than it gave me. I'm not going to discount it entirely, because again, there is stuff that works here. Unfortunately, those parts that worked weren't enough for me to stick around to the parts that didn't. Sorry guys, on the Halloween scale, I'm giving you 3 of those black and orange wrapped mystery candies out of 7 Reese Cup pumpkins, with 2 partially sucked jawbreakers on this side. Please understand, my rating system is very complex. And no, I'm not going to explain it to you. Alright, let's see, what's next? Oh, we've got a certified Super Nintendo classic here. An old one, if you will. It's Yashim's Call of Cthulhu, featuring the Super Mario, you know, from the Super Mario franchise. This one is like a full-sized candy bar from that middle-aged woman with all the cats that looks at every child that walks up to her door with an unfathomable sadness. Call of Cthulhu doesn't take much from its namesake aside from the heavy atmosphere and a few basic concepts, instead being a more general Lovecraftian experience. But holy wow, does it heap on the atmosphere. The sprite work is immaculate, and the music choices are perfect. Super Mario World has never been creepier. It's not just about the aesthetic though, there's some pretty damn good gameplay concepts here. Call of Cthulhu capitalizes on the non-Euclidean architecture of Relay to present you with plenty of unique platforming challenges. At one point, the screen begins wrapping around vertically. At another, Mario's perspective is warped, and you have to jump between the foreground and the background seamlessly. It's really crazy how effectively this game messes with your head. Now, the game is difficult. Very difficult. But you're actually encouraged to use save states frequently to tackle each challenge on its own, without worrying too much about conserving lives or finding checkpoints. In fact, there are exactly none of those throughout Mario's adventure through Dread Cthulhu's world, meaning if you die, it's back to the beginning, as in the beginning of the entire game. Unless you're really intent on getting into character and going completely insane, I'd recommend taking the game up on its offer when it comes to save states. Speaking of going nuts, appropriately, Mario's sanity is on the line here. You'll have to pick up these tokens to help him hold on to his marbles, and no, that's not the man himself. These Gaunt tokens replace Dragon Coins, 5 per chapter, so I'd recommend making a save at the beginning of each stage to make sure you can go back to get any you might have missed. You'll need all of the Goomba Man effigies to get the good ending, lest poor Mario suffer the unthinkable in his quest to save the young sacrifice from her fate at the hands of Dread Cthulhu. That said, the city that sleeps beneath the sea can be a real pain in the ass sometimes, and the level design isn't always exactly player-friendly. Having effectively infinite tries at every challenge doesn't make all of them fun. In particular, the black and white area sucks, with these X-parasite things floating around all over the place. And the dark area it's connected to has a tendency to hide enemies in the tall grass, annoyingly. Those parts are fairly brief though, so if you can soldier through them, it's overall a delightful experience. Call of Cthulhu is a classic for a reason, appropriately dripping with atmosphere, dread, and interesting concepts. I think I said dread like 5 times during that. I'm sorry. Now, if Call of Cthulhu was a full-size candy bar, the last 2 snacks in my bag of tricks are those king-size bars, the ones you only get from your grandparents when you get a good report card. We're talking a full brick of tooth-rotting goodness, the kind of thing you treasure for the relatively fleeting moments it's in your grip, then remember fondly for days to come. Alright. Well, I'm probably romanticizing these hypothetical candy bars a bit much, but these hacks are really good. First up, we have a hack that's not necessarily horror or Halloween themed, but there's plenty of spooks to be had in Indigo Chapter 2. Ocarina of Time feels absolutely brand spanking new with Indigo patched in, with entirely new areas, items, characters, music, enemies, and even more. I cannot understate how impressive this hack is, so let's get into it. After Majora's Mask, Link returned to the Lost Woods, finding his way to a new land called Volana, and finally settling down. And when I say settling down, I mean this guy went deep in a woods. Link is in his late 30s in this game, which means he's probably starting to notice a lot of aches and pains in his knees and lower back. I find that squats in the morning help me with that one, bud. One day, an old acquaintance shows up at the Hero of Time's door. Tail, the brother of Tattle, the fairy who accompanied him through Terranigma, has come seeking Link's help. Tattle has gone missing, so it's time for the old man to dust off his adventuring gear and track down another lost fairy friend. Thus begins your adventure through Volana, which is a fully fleshed out world with its own characters, history, and lore. This world feels rich. So rich it'll make your spit hurt. This world doesn't just have reskins of Ocarina or Majora areas either, although some of those do exist as placeholders, which are clearly pointed out. There's service paid to the entire franchise here, especially the oft-forgotten Oracle games, which are a personal favorite of mine. Even the Subrosians and the Minish show up. Seriously, this game has so much to see and do, it's crazy, and this is only a demo. Speaking of which, I know this is Chapter 2, but you can skip right to it. Chapter 1 is more of a tech demo for some of the ideas the team had. Not exactly necessary to experience unless you're really curious. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of what Indigo has to offer, because discovery is half the fun with stuff like this. So I'm going to keep my segment on this one brief. Just know that 2 of the 3 dungeons included in this demo are spooktacular. Perfect for the Halloween season. So don't balk at the fact that this isn't like Ocarina of Time Spirit of Halloween edition or something. Trust me. This is the most frightened I've been of a Zelda game since I was a little squirt. It's so scary, it even has gay skeletons. Don't let that ward you off, though, because Indigo is probably the most impressive piece of Zelda 64 content out there today. The dev team is pretty big, so I didn't really have anywhere to seamlessly fit it into the script. Like, Spooky Mission and All Hallows Eve earlier were already kind of pushing it, so here they are. Ajiker, CDi-Fails, Fig, Hiisuya, Kintanim, Nitro Car Wash, Ostri Lava 02, Shreedao, Thero, and TheEggoEffect. Great job, guys. Just pretend I did like a really hilarious bit involving their names or something. I'll slip you all a $5 on the way out. Alright, well, we're all sick to our stomachs and puking up the night's loot. It's time to cram down one last big old bar of processed cacao with a hack that really needs no introduction. B3313 has quickly become one of the most popular Mario 64 ROM hacks in a relatively short time, gaining interest even with people who don't care much for Mario 64 or even Mario in general. It's not for no reason either, because B3 is an incredibly impressive hack, put together by another huge list of people, led by Chris R. Leo, known online as Brutal Aggression. Speaking of impressive, that guy's also a seriously talented musician, so go check him out if you're into music by a guy who calls himself Brutal Aggression on the internet. I'm sure you can guess what to expect. For the few people left who don't know what B3 is, just imagine Peach's castle from Mario 64 stretched on forever into infinity and got weirder as it went. There's no real outright horror in B3, so much as there is just an intense air of discomfort around the whole thing. There are a couple jump scares here and there, a couple spooky shadow dudes, but the star of the show is just getting lost in a familiar yet unfamiliar world, and realizing you have no idea where you are. You're never far from your starting point, since you can always just retreat to the castle entrance from the pause screen. But even then, are you really where you started? Or does it only seem that way? And even if you go back outside, where to from there? The only way to continue is back into the castle, or maybe through the back door, or maybe in here, or over here. No matter how many doors you step through, there are always more waiting for you to open them. You'll come to appreciate your brief interactions with the few talking NPCs, no matter how simple their text may be, since it'll at least be a sign of life in this endless rat maze you're trapped in. Mario's placeholder voice clips from early development make even the beloved plumber seem distant and unfamiliar. Is this even Mario? Why are we here? Does this script really need to go on any longer? These are all questions that may or may not be answered as you explore the castle's endless halls, searching for stars and maybe more. B3's goal isn't really to be a fun platformer. It's more like Yume Nikki or LSD Dream Emulator, where the draw is just exploring and finding new things to look at. That said, there are some pretty decent stages in there that are genuinely fun to play, so you'll occasionally have a break from the oppressive atmosphere to actually play a video game for a bit. And if you decide you want to see everything this game has to offer, well, you're going to be in for a long haul. There are well over 400 stars in this Leviathan, and even more game to see after that. So, good luck. I think there are scant few games that accurately capture what it was like to play video games as a kid. Not knowing how big the worlds were or what the limits of the game were. But B3 gets pretty damn close. B3313 is the perfect game to fire up, turn out the lights, curl up under a blanket, and just start walking. Just don't go looking anywhere you aren't supposed to, or you might find yourself somewhere you don't want to be. And with that, my bag's empty. You'll find the download links to all these hacks in the description below, so head on down to pick out your favorites. Hopefully, at least one of them grabbed your attention, because I think every creator, no matter how rancid their work might be, deserves a little attention and feedback on their work. Hell, there's nothing that makes me happier than reading my 20th When's Lost Age comment of the week. Alright, that's all I've got. Clear out. You've had your fun. I gotta clean up all these wrappers you hoodlums left on my floor. This has been Torvis and his dangerously high blood glucose levels. Happy Halloween. And God bless.